I'm standing in what's left of my barn at dawn, looking at the splintered boards and tufts of dark fur caught in the broken wood. The horses are gone, the farm is gone, my entire way of life is gone. Something had been watching my family for years, and I ignored every single warning sign until it was too late. This is the story of how I lost almost everything. My family ran a small horse farm in a rural area right up against dense forest. We'd been there for 3 generations. My grandfather built the original barn, my father expanded it, and I was supposed to pass it on to my kids. We had a dozen high-quality horses on the property at any given time. Some were for breeding, others we trained for dressage and show jumping. These weren't backyard ponies. We're talking animals worth $15,000 to $40,000 each. Some we even rented out to neighboring farms for breeding purposes. The farm was everything. It was our income, our legacy, our future for the kids. My wife and I had 2 children who were 6 and 9 years old when this all happened. They grew up around those horses, learned to ride before they could read. Behind our property, the forest stretched for miles and miles, mostly untouched wilderness. No roads back there, no hiking trails, nothing. Just trees and whatever lived in them. Looking back, the signs started about 3 years before everything fell apart. I just didn't want to see them for what they were. It began with broken fence posts along the tree line. I'd go out to check the pastures and find these thick wooden posts snapped clean in half. Not rotted through or termite damaged, just broken like someone took a baseball bat to them. The breaks were clean, showing the force had been applied suddenly and with tremendous strength. I blamed it on the weather, on age, on anything that made sense. Then there were the footprints, massive footprints in the mud near the creek that ran through our back 40. Much larger than any boot I'd ever seen. I measured one once, 17 inches long, 7 inches wide at the ball of the foot. I convinced myself they were bear tracks, even though they didn't really look like bear tracks. Bears leave claw marks. These didn't have claw marks. The toes were defined, clearly separated, 5 of them just like a human foot, but impossibly large. These looked more like, let myself think about what they look like. The horses started acting strange at night. They'd whinny and stamp in their stalls for no reason. I'd go out to check on them and find them all pressed against the far wall, eyes rolling, nostrils flared. The barn would reek of their fear sweat. I'd walk the perimeter with a flashlight and never find anything. But the horses knew. Animals have instincts we've lost. They could sense something out there that I couldn't. My stallion, the big one I use for breeding, started losing weight. The vet couldn't find anything wrong with him. He was eating, drinking, everything seemed normal. But he was dropping pounds like he was sick. Stress, the vet finally said. Something was stressing him out. At night, I'd hear him kicking the walls of his stall. Bang, bang, bang for hours. In the morning, there'd be dents in the wood from his hooves. My wife complained about feeling watched when she hung laundry near the woods. She'd be out there in broad daylight, clothespins in her mouth, and she'd get this creeping sensation on the back of her neck. The kind of feeling you get when someone's staring at you. She'd turn around and see nothing but trees. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It would follow her around the yard. Eventually, she started doing laundry in town at the laundromat instead. Said it was easier. I knew better. One morning, I found a deer carcass hung in a tree branch 12 feet off the ground. It was partially eaten. Now, I've hunted my whole life. I know how animals feed. This wasn't how animals feed. The deer had been placed there deliberately, carefully balanced on the branch like someone was storing it for later. The meat that was missing had been torn away in chunks, and I could see what looked like finger marks in the remaining flesh. Not teeth marks, finger marks, like something had grabbed the meat and pulled. There was also a smell near the property line, not all the time, but sometimes when the wind came from the forest. It was musky and rank, like wet dog mixed with rotting vegetation and something else. something I couldn't identify. It would make your stomach turn if you got too close to it, make your eyes water. I blamed it on a dead animal decomposing somewhere in the woods. But the smell would come and go. If it was a dead animal, it should have either gotten worse or faded away completely. This smell kept returning, always strongest right at dusk. About 6 months before I lost everything, the situation started escalating in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. The horses refused to graze in the back pasture. These were animals that had spent their entire lives on this property. And suddenly, they wouldn't go near the tree line. I'd open the gate to let them out, and they'd bunch up by the barn instead. When I tried to lead them out, they'd plant their hooves and refuse to budge. A 1,200-pound animal is immovable when it doesn't want to move. One morning, I watched from the kitchen window as 3 of my horses stood at the fence line of the near pasture, all facing the woods. They stood completely still for over an hour, just staring. Not grazing, not moving, just watching something I couldn't see. Their ears were pricked forward, their bodies tense. I went outside to look and couldn't see anything unusual. But the horses didn't move. They maintained their vigil until I finally led them back to the barn by hand. I found clumps of coarse black hair on the fence posts. Long hair, thick hair, matted and greasy. Too long and thick for a bear. I know what bear fur looks like. This was different. Coarser, almost like human hair, but not quite. When I touched it, it felt wrong somehow. Oily and stiff at the same time. I pulled one of the clumps down and it left a smell on my hands that wouldn't wash off for hours. Then one morning I came outside and found my daughter's swing set bent. The metal poles were twisted like someone had tried to pull the whole thing out of the ground. These were thick metal poles set in concrete. I couldn't bend them if I tried. Something with immense strength had grabbed hold of that swing set and wrenched it nearly in half. The seats were dragging on the ground. My daughter cried when she saw it. The barn door had deep scratches on it, gouges in the wood running vertically down the door. When I measured them, the highest scratch was 8 feet off the ground. I tried to think of an animal that could scratch wood at 8 feet while standing on the ground. I couldn't. The scratches were parallel, 4 of them side by side, like fingers. My wife heard heavy footsteps circling the house at 2 a.m. She woke me up, terrified, saying something was walking around out there. We lay in bed listening to these slow, heavy thuds. Too slow for a running animal, too heavy for a person. Each footfall shook the house slightly. We listened to whatever it was circle the entire house twice before the sound faded back toward the woods. I installed motion sensor lights all around the property. They'd go off at random times during the night. I'd look out the window and see nothing. Or sometimes I'd catch just a glimpse of something large moving out of the light's range. Something walking upright. The lights would trigger in sequence sometimes, like something was deliberately walking the perimeter, testing our defenses. My son told me about something he'd seen from the school bus. He was 9 years old then. The bus dropped him off at the end of our long driveway every afternoon around 3:30. One day in early spring, he came running into the house, breathing hard, eyes wide. He said there was a man standing in the woods watching him walk up the driveway, a really tall man covered in hair. He'd stopped walking and stared at it, and it had stared back. Then it had turned and walked deeper into the forest, not hurrying, just walking away like it had all the time in the world. My son said it walked on 2 legs but hunched over, its arms hanging down almost to its knees. I told him it must have been a hunter in camouflage. He insisted it wasn't. He knew what hunters look like. This was different. This wasn't wearing clothes. This was covered in hair, dark brown hair all over its body. I drove down to the end of the driveway after dinner and looked around, found footprints in the soft earth at the tree line. They weren't human footprints. I measured them. 16 inches long. I told my son I'd start picking him up from school instead of letting him take the bus. He seemed relieved. A week later, my daughter came to me before bed. She was 6, small for her age, scared of the dark. She said the hairy man had looked in her window. She'd woken up to use the bathroom and seen a face pressed against the glass. A flat nose, dark eyes, hair covering everything except the eyes and nose and mouth. She'd screamed and her mother had come running, but by the time they got to the window, there was nothing there. I checked outside in the morning. Her window was 8 feet off the ground. There was a clear impression in the mulch below where something had stood. The impression was deep, like whatever made it was extremely heavy. There were handprints on the window glass. I measured them. The palm print was 9 inches across. The fingers had left smudges extending another 6 inches. I didn't let the kids sleep in that room anymore. They bunked together in the room on the opposite side of the house, the side facing away from the woods. I nailed the curtain shut in the abandoned bedroom and didn't go in there unless I had to. I started seeing movement in the woods all the time, not animals, something larger, something that moved with purpose. I'd be working in the yard and catch a glimpse of something dark moving between the trees. When I'd look directly at it, it would be gone. But the impression remained, the sense of being observed. One evening I was working on the fence line, replacing the boards that kept getting broken. The sun was getting low, maybe an hour of good light left. I heard a branch snap behind me. I turned around and saw it standing about 50 feet away, partially hidden behind a large oak tree. It was watching me work, just standing there, one massive hand gripping the tree trunk, peering around at me. We made eye contact. Its eyes were dark, almost black, but there was intelligence in them. Awareness. It knew I saw it. And it didn't care. I slowly reached for the hammer I'd set down, not to throw it, just to have something in my hand. The creature tilted its head, like it was curious about what I was doing. Then it pushed away from the tree and walked deeper into the forest. It didn't hurry. It walked upright, slightly hunched, its long arms swinging. In a few seconds, it had disappeared completely into the undergrowth. I abandoned the fence work and went straight to the house. I was shaking. The thing had been so close. Close enough that I could have hit it with a thrown rock if I'd tried. And it hadn't been afraid of me at all. A few nights later, my wife and I were watching television in the living room. The kids were asleep upstairs. Around 10 o'clock, we heard a sound from the back porch, a scraping sound, like something dragging across wood. Then a heavy thud, like something large had dropped onto the porch. I grabbed my rifle from the closet, told my wife to lock the doors behind me and call the sheriff if I wasn't back in 5 minutes. Stepped out the front door and worked my way around the side of the house, rifle raised. The back porch was empty, but our garbage can had been dragged off the porch and into the yard. It was tipped over, the lid torn off. Garbage was scattered everywhere. In the middle of the mess were 2 large footprints, clear as day in the spilled coffee grounds and food scraps. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the pile on the porch steps. It had left a pile there deliberately. Feces. An enormous pile, way too large to be from any normal animal. It was marking territory, sending a message. This is my space. You're only here because I allow it. I cleaned it up before my wife saw it. Told her a raccoon had gotten into the garbage. She believed me, or pretended to. I think by that point, she knew something was seriously wrong but didn't want to admit it. Admitting it would make it real. Late autumn, right around dusk, I was putting the horses in for the night. It was getting dark earlier and earlier, and I always tried to have them secured in their stalls before full darkness hit. The temperature was dropping fast. I could see my breath in the air. I heard a sound from the woods. It wasn't a howl and it wasn't a roar. It was somewhere in between, low and rumbling, like it was coming from deep in something's chest. It made the hair on my arm stand up. It made my stomach drop. That sound was wrong. It was the kind of sound that triggers every primitive fear response hardwired into the human brain. One of my mares started screaming. Not whinnying, screaming. It's a sound a horse only makes when it thinks it's about to die. High-pitched and desperate, full of pure terror. I ran to the far paddock and found her trapped in the corner, trembling so hard her whole body was shaking. Foam was dripping from her mouth. Her eyes showed white all around. She was staring at something beyond the fence line. Following her gaze, I saw something massive moving in the shadows among the trees. It was upright, at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark, matted fur that seemed to absorb what little light remained. It swayed slightly from side to side as it watched us. Not swaying like it was unstable, swaying deliberately, rhythmically, like it was calculating something, deciding something. I stood there frozen, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't exist. I'd grown up in these woods. I'd hunted here since I was 12 years old. I knew every animal that lived here. This wasn't one of them. The creature raised one arm, pointed at the horse, then at me. The gesture was unmistakable, deliberate. It was claiming the horse, telling me it could take what it wanted. Then it simply melted back into the trees. 1 second it was there, clearly visible despite the darkness. The next it was gone, like it had never existed at all. But I knew what I'd seen, and more importantly, the horse knew. The horse had seen it too. The mare had to be treated by the vet for stress. She wouldn't eat for 3 days, wouldn't drink. The vet couldn't find anything physically wrong with her, but she'd lost significant weight and her coat looked dull. Fear had nearly killed her. The vet asked me what had frightened her so badly. I told him I didn't know. I couldn't find the words to explain what I'd seen. Over the next few days, all my horses started acting strange. They'd cluster together in the center of the paddock during the day, as far from the woods as possible. At night, they'd kick their stalls, whinny constantly, refuse to settle down. The barn became a constant chorus of anxiety. I'd go out there at 2 a.m. and find all 12 horses standing alert, ears forward, staring at the same spot on the back wall of the barn, staring at something I couldn't see. The next morning, I called the county rangers. I couldn't bring myself to tell them what I'd really seen. They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I thought I was crazy. So I told them I suspected a problem bear on the property. 2 rangers came out that afternoon. They walked the perimeter, inspected the scratches on the barn, collected the hair samples from the fence posts, took photos of the tracks. They agreed it looked like bear sign, but I could tell they were puzzled. One of them measured the tracks and frowned. He said the stride pattern wasn't quite right for a bear. The hair samples were the wrong texture, wrong color for the black bears we had in the area. But what else could it be? They set up trail cameras in the woods and baited traps. Over the next 2 weeks, hunters came through looking for a bear den. They searched the entire forest section behind my property. They found nothing. No den, no scat, no territorial markings, no fresh kills, nothing. The rangers concluded the bear must have moved on and took their cameras down. They told me to call if I had any more trouble. I thanked them and tried to believe they were right. The winter months were quiet, no incidents, no signs, nothing. The horses settled down. My wife stopped sleeping with a baseball bat propped against the nightstand. The kids played outside again without me watching them constantly. I used that quiet time to repair fences and reinforce the barn. I replaced the damaged boards and added extra bolts to all the doors. I told myself I was just being cautious. I told myself the whole thing had been some kind of weird coincidence. Bears wander. They follow food sources. It made sense that one had passed through and then moved on. I wanted to believe it was over. I needed to believe it was over. Early spring came and the snow melted. That's when things started up again. I found a horse blanket torn to shreds in the middle of the back pasture. It looked like something had grabbed it and ripped it apart with its bare hands. Not chewed, ripped. That night, something hit the barn so hard the walls shook. I was inside the house and felt the impact. I grabbed my hunting rifle and ran outside. My prize stallion was in his stall, eyes rolling white with terror. His whole body was lathered in sweat. Outside, I found deep impressions in the mud by the fence. Not hoof prints, hand prints, 5 fingers, each print 14 inches long. The fence boards were broken outward, like something had tried to reach through and grab the horse. I stood there in the dark with my rifle, staring at those handprints, and finally admitted to myself what this was. This wasn't a bear. This wasn't any animal I'd learned about in school. This was something else entirely. 3 nights later, the horses started screaming at midnight, all of them at once in pure terror. I grabbed my rifle and ran to the barn in my underwear and boots. My wife was shouting behind me, asking what was happening. I told her to lock the doors and keep the kids inside. The side door was ripped completely off its hinges. It was hanging by one twisted nail, swinging in the cold wind. These were thick wooden doors with heavy iron hardware, the kind of door designed to withstand a horse kicking it from the inside. Whatever had done this possessed incredible strength. The wood around the hinges was splintered outward, showing the force had come from outside. My youngest mare was missing from her stall. The stall door was intact, latched shut, but she was gone. I'd raised that horse from birth, 3 years old, gentle as a lamb, just starting her training for dressage. She was worth $20,000. More than that, she was family. I followed a trail of disturbed earth and blood spots into the edge of the woods. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the flashlight. The blood trail was intermittent. A drop here, a smear there. Not a lot of blood, but enough to tell me she was injured. About 200 yards in, I found her. Her neck was broken. She was lying on her side, legs twisted at wrong angles. She'd been partially dragged through the underbrush. I could see the drag marks in the dirt, deep gouges where something heavy had been pulled. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see finger marks in the bruising on her body. Not claw marks, finger marks. Dark purple bruises in the shape of a hand, each finger clearly defined. Something with hands had grabbed her throat and snapped her neck. The prints were huge. I placed my own hand next to one of the bruises. My hand looked like a child's in comparison. There were other marks too. Scratches along her flanks where she'd been grabbed. Bite marks on her shoulder, but not like any animal bite I'd seen. The teeth pattern was wrong, too human. The canines were pronounced, but the overall arrangement was closer to human than wolf or bear. I called the sheriff's department. They came out, looked at everything, took some photos, and documented it as a wildlife incident. One deputy suggested it might have been a mountain lion, even though mountain lions hadn't been seen in this area in decades. I didn't argue with him. What was I going to say? That a Bigfoot killed my horse? They'd have me committed. Each of those horses represented years of work and investment. I couldn't afford to lose another one. But I had no idea how to stop something like this. How do you protect against something that shouldn't exist? The other horses knew what had happened. The next morning, they wouldn't leave their stalls. I had to lead each one out individually, and they fought me every step. They didn't want to go near the paddock. They didn't want to be outside at all. Their fear was contagious. Even I didn't want to be out there anymore. After that night, I started seeing them more clearly, always at dusk or dawn. Standing at the forest edge, just watching the house. Sometimes there was one, sometimes there were two, one larger than the other. They'd stand there for 10 or 15 minutes, completely still, and then vanish back into the trees. I'd blink and they'd be gone. My kids saw one from their bedroom window. They asked me why the big, hairy man was standing by the trees. I told them it was a trick of the light. I told them to stay away from the windows after dark. My wife was terrified. She wanted to leave. She wanted to pack up the kids and move in with her mother in town. But where would that leave us? The farm was everything. It was our income, our home, our future. We couldn't just walk away. I started keeping the kids inside after 4 in the afternoon. I drove them to school in the morning instead of letting them wait for the bus. I stationed myself by the window every night with my rifle, watching the tree line. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating properly. I was running on fear and coffee and the desperate hope that I could protect my family. Whatever was out there started testing us, pushing boundaries, seeing what it could get away with. My tool shed was broken into. The metal door was bent backwards. Tools were scattered everywhere, but nothing was stolen. It was like something had just wanted to prove it could get in. The chicken coop was destroyed in one night. All 6 chickens killed, but not eaten, just killed and left there. The coop itself was smashed flat. Deep gouges appeared on the side of my truck, 4 parallel scratches running the length of the driver's side, like someone had dragged their fingers along the paint. My wife's garden was completely trampled, every plant ripped up by the roots and scattered. She'd spent weeks planting that garden. She cried when she saw it. It started to feel personal, like whatever was doing, this was toying with us, playing with us. I set up my own trail cameras, better ones than the rangers had used, but they kept getting destroyed or knocked down. And when I did manage to get footage, the creature stayed just out of clear frame. I got one shot that showed a massive dark shape with eyes reflecting the camera flash, standing upright among the trees. When I zoomed in, all the details blurred out, but you could see the basic form, upright, tall, covered in fur. Late May, I was taking the garbage out after dinner. The sun was just starting to set, painting the sky orange and pink. It should have been beautiful. Instead, everything felt threatening. I heard heavy breathing behind the barn, deep, rasping breaths, like something that had been running, or something very large just breathing normally. I turned the corner, and it was there, 15 feet away from me, close enough to see every detail. It was bigger than I'd thought. Had to be at least 8 feet tall, maybe 8.5, probably 600 or 700 pounds of muscle and fur. Its face was almost human, but not quite. Flat nose with wide nostrils, heavy brow ridge that cast shadows over its eyes. Eyes that were too knowing, too intelligent. They weren't animal eyes. They held something more, awareness, understanding, intent. It was covered head to toe in dark brown-black fur, matted and dirty. The fur was longer on its head and shoulders, shorter on its face and palms. Its hands were massive, easily twice the size of mine. The fingers were thick and powerful, with dark nails that looked hard as stone. The smell hit me like a physical force, like death and sweat and something ancient and wild. It was overwhelming, made my eyes water, made me want to gag. I'd never smelled anything like it. The closest comparison I can make is if you took wet dog smell, mixed it with the scent of rotting meat, added in pure animal musk, and multiplied it by 10. We stared at each other. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My rifle was slung over my shoulder and my hands wouldn't obey the command to reach for it. My body had frozen completely. Some primitive part of my brain recognized that I was looking at an apex predator, something that could kill me in seconds if it chose to. The creature raised its arms and beat its chest. The sound boomed across the property. Boom, boom, boom. I felt it in my chest, in my bones. It bellowed, a deep roar that seemed to come from the earth itself. The sound was so loud, so powerful, that for a moment I couldn't hear anything else. My ears rang. Finally, my hands started working. I unslung the rifle and raised it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the gun steady. The creature took a step toward me instead of away. Its foot hit the ground with a heavy thud. The earth seemed to vibrate. I fired into the air, a warning shot. The crack of the rifle was deafening in the quiet evening. Birds exploded from the trees. It flinched but didn't run. It just backed slowly into the shadows, never taking its eyes off me. Each step was deliberate, controlled. It wasn't retreating in fear, it was choosing to leave. There's a difference. Then it was gone, melted back into the forest like smoke. I stood there with my heart pounding so hard I thought I might have a heart attack. My legs wouldn't stop shaking. I'd come face to face with it, with something that shouldn't exist. And it hadn't been afraid of me at all. If anything, I was afraid of it. Terrified. I went back inside. My wife asked if I'd seen something. I told her it was just a deer. I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. I needed to process it myself first. Needed to figure out what to do. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in a chair by the window with my rifle across my lap, watching the tree line. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every sound made me jump. At around 3 a.m, I saw movement at the edge of the property. Something large and upright standing just inside the tree line, watching the house. Watching me watching it. We stayed like that until dawn, 2 creatures staring at each other across 100 yards of grass. Neither of us moving, neither of us backing down. When the sun finally came up, it turned and walked back into the forest. I finally let myself breathe. The next day, I bought electric fence supplies. 3 days of hard work installing it around the entire perimeter. I reinforced all the barn doors with steel brackets. I moved the horses to the stalls closest to the house where I could see them from the kitchen window. I set up floodlights on motion sensors, industrial strength ones that lit up the whole property like a football stadium. I slept in the barn for a week straight with my loaded rifle. My wife and kids stayed at her mother's place in town. I told her it was just until I got the security situation sorted out. By the end of that week, I was exhausted, running on maybe 2 hours of sleep a night. I couldn't keep this up forever. I was one man against something I didn't understand and couldn't fight. One night, I dozed off in the barn, just for a minute. When I jerked awake, I found that something had torn down 40 feet of electric fence. The posts were ripped right out of the ground and snapped like twigs. Whatever this thing was, it was stronger than anything I could build. My wife's mother needed her house back. She was elderly, and having my wife and 2 kids there for over a week had worn her out. So my family came home. I didn't tell my wife about the destroyed fence. I'd already rebuilt it. I didn't tell her I'd seen the creature up close. She was already scared enough. For 4 days, everything was quiet, almost too quiet. I started to think maybe the thing had finally moved on. Maybe my show of force had worked. On the 5th night at 3 a.m, I learned how wrong I was. Over the next week, I tried to maintain some kind of normalcy. But everything had changed. The fear had settled into our bones. My daughter wouldn't sleep alone. She'd crawl into bed with us every night, shaking, crying, saying she could hear them outside. Sometimes I could hear them too. The heavy footsteps, the low rumbling sounds they made to communicate. They were still out there, still watching. My son stopped playing outside completely. He'd stand at the window and stare at the woods. One day I found him with a baseball bat, practicing his swing. He said he was getting ready in case they came back. He was 9 years old. No 9-year-old should have to think like that. The horses were a wreck. Several had stopped eating, others had developed nervous habits. One mare paced her stall constantly, wearing a path in the dirt. Another had started biting herself, leaving raw patches on her legs. The stress was killing them as surely as any physical attack. I installed more lights, reinforced what was left of the barn, set up cameras. None of it made me feel safer. None of it would stop something that strong, that intelligent, that determined. My wife barely spoke to me. When she did, it was about leaving, about getting the kids somewhere safe, about how we were risking everything by staying. She was right, but leaving meant giving up everything we'd built, everything my family had built for 3 generations. One night, I found her packing boxes in the kids' rooms. She wasn't asking anymore. She was telling me. We were leaving with or without me. 2 nights before we finally made the decision to sell, they came back. This time they didn't attack the barn, they attacked the paddock fence. I woke up to the sound of wood breaking, ran outside with my rifle to find them systematically destroying the fencing. 3 of them this time, working together, ripping out fence posts, throwing them aside like they weighed nothing. I fired into the air. They stopped and looked at me. One of them picked up a fence post, had to be 80 pounds, and threw it. The post sailed through the air and crashed into the side of my truck, caving in the door. A warning, a demonstration of power. Then they left. Just turned and walked away. They could have attacked me, could have come for the house, but they didn't. They were sending a message. You can't stop us. You can't fight us. Leave or we'll escalate. The next morning, I found one of my horses dead in her stall. Natural causes, the vet said, heart attack. But I knew better. The stress had killed her, the constant fear. She'd literally been scared to death. That horse was pregnant, due to foal in 3 months. I'd lost 2 lives that day. The foal would have been worth $25,000. That was my kids' college fund gone in one night. The sound woke me from a dead sleep. Horses screaming, wood splintering, metal screeching. All of it at once in a terrible symphony of destruction. The whole house was shaking. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside in my underwear and boots. My wife was right behind me, shouting, asking what was happening. I told her to stay in the house, get the kids into the bathroom, lock the door, call 911. She ran back inside. The barn was being torn apart from the outside, not one side, multiple sides at once. There was more than one of them. The creature I'd been seeing was ripping boards off the wall on the south side, reaching through the gaps for the horses inside. On the north side, I could see another shape, smaller but still massive, doing the same thing. They were working together, coordinating. The horses inside were in complete panic. I could hear them kicking the stalls, screaming, trying desperately to escape. But there was nowhere to go. The creatures had them trapped. I raised my rifle and fired at the larger one. Hit it in the shoulder. I saw the impact, saw it flinch. It roared and dropped to all fours, then charged me at a speed I didn't think something that large could move. It covered the distance between us in seconds. I dove to the side and it rushed past, so close I felt its fur brush my arm. The fur was coarse and damp with dew. I rolled to my feet and fired again as it turned around. The shot went wide, missed. The rifle jammed. I tried to cycle another round and the mechanism stuck. The creature stopped 10 feet away, rose to its full height. We locked eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes. In that moment, I saw something in them I hadn't seen before. Not just animal cunning, not just predator intelligence. Something more. It knew exactly what it was doing. It understood. That's when I heard my son screaming from the house. "Daddy! Daddy!" The creature heard it too. It looked past me toward the house where my family was, where my children were. The smaller creature had stopped tearing at the barn and was also looking at the house. They were considering something, making a decision. I raised the jammed rifle like a club. I didn't care that I couldn't shoot. I'd beat them with it if I had to. I'd die before I let them near my family. The larger creature looked back at me. We held that gaze for what felt like an eternity. Then it made a sound, a low rumble that seemed to come from its chest. The smaller one responded with a similar sound, some kind of communication. Then they turned and walked back toward the woods, not running, walking, taking their time. The larger one stopped at the tree line and looked back at me one more time. Then they were gone. In that moment, I understood. This thing could have killed me anytime it wanted. It could have come from my family anytime it wanted. But it hadn't. It was giving me a choice. Keep fighting and risk everything, or leave. The message was clear. This was their territory. We were the intruders. And they were done being patient with us. When the sheriff's deputies arrived 20 minutes later, they found the barn in ruins. 2 sides had been partially demolished, boards ripped off, support beams cracked, the roof sagging dangerously. Inside, 2 horses were injured. One had deep lacerations down her flank where she had crashed into something sharp trying to escape. Another had kicked through her stall door and broken her leg in the process. The deputies took photos, measured the damage, asked questions I couldn't really answer. What had I seen? How many animals? What direction did they go? I told them the truth, mostly. Multiple large animals, very large, attacked the barn, went back into the woods. I didn't tell them the animals walked on 2 legs and had hands. They wrote it up as a bear attack, maybe 2 bears. Very unusual behavior, they said. They'd notify fish and wildlife. The vet came at dawn. The horse with the broken leg had to be put down. She was worth $18,000. The one with lacerations needed stitches and antibiotics. Another $1,000 in vet bills. My insurance wouldn't cover any of it. The policy specifically excluded unexplained animal attacks and acts of nature. This qualified as both. I sat at the kitchen table as the sun came up. My wife was crying. The kids were terrified. They'd seen everything through the upstairs window. My son asked me if the hairy men were going to come back. I told him no. I told him we were safe now. I was lying, and he knew it. My wife looked at me and said what we'd both been thinking. We can't stay here. She was right. I'd been trying to protect the horses and the farm and our way of life. But I couldn't protect my family and keep the horses safe. Not from this. I couldn't prove what was out there. The authorities thought it was bears. I couldn't kill these things. I'd shot one and it had barely slowed down. And even if I did kill one, there were others. That night had proven they worked together, coordinated, planned. My kids had to come first. Nothing else mattered. The day I listed the horses for sale, I went down to the far pasture one last time. I needed to see the place where this had all started, where I'd first seen the creature watching my mare. I found fresh tracks, still wet from the morning dew, leading from the woods to within 50 feet of where I was standing. It had been here this morning, watching me. Maybe it had been watching me make the phone calls to potential buyers. Maybe it had been watching me take down the for sale signs I'd put up around the property. I looked up and saw it standing at the tree line, the large one, the alpha, if that's what you called them. We stared at each other across the pasture. Then it did something I'll never forget. It nodded, just once, slow and deliberate, like it was acknowledging something, like it understood what I was doing. Then it turned and walked back into the forest. That was the last time I saw it. But I knew it was still there, still watching, and I knew it always would be. This was its home, not mine. I'd just been borrowing space in their territory, and now they wanted it back. Within 2 weeks, I'd listed all the horses for sale. Buyers came from 3 counties over. They could sense my desperation. They knew I needed to move these animals fast. They lowballed me on every single one. The prize stallion that I'd paid $35,000 for went for $16,000. The show mare that had won 3 competitions sold for $12,000. She was worth at least $25,000. The younger horses, the ones with potential, went for bargain prices. Buyers would look at them, see how stressed they were, how skittish, and use that to negotiate down. I watched them load those horses into trailers and drive away. Each one was a memory. The stallion I'd bought at auction 5 years ago, outbidding everyone there. The mare I delivered myself when her mother died during birth. The 3-year-old I'd trained from a foal who trusted me completely. Gone. My daughter cried when they took her favorite pony, a gentle old mare who taught both kids to ride. The pony was 20 years old, not worth much money, but worth everything to my daughter. The buyer promised to take good care of her. I wanted to believe him. My son didn't cry, he just stood there watching, his face hard. Too hard for a 9-year-old. He'd learned too much about loss, about fear, about things that shouldn't exist but do. In total, I got about $140,000 for 12 horses that were collectively worth close to $300,000. I'd lost over $150,000, and that was just the horses. That didn't count the barn damage, the vet bills, the destroyed equipment, the broken fencing. I listed the farm for sale the same week, priced at $30,000 below market value just to move it fast. My real estate agent asked why I was in such a hurry. I told her we'd found a place closer to town. Better schools for the kids. She didn't push it. A young couple came to look at it a week later. First-time property buyers, fresh out of college, full of dreams. They wanted to start an organic farm. No animals, just crops. They walked the property with bright eyes, talking about where they'd put the greenhouse, where the vegetable gardens would go. The husband asked if we'd had any problems with wildlife. I hesitated. My wife squeezed my hand, hard, a warning. I said wildlife could be aggressive around here. Be careful at night. Keep your doors locked. The couple laughed, said they'd lived in the country before. They could handle it. They made an offer that afternoon, below asking price, but close. We accepted immediately. The week before we moved out was the longest of my life. Every night I expected them to come back, to finish what they'd started, to punish us for not leaving fast enough. They didn't. The property was quiet, almost too quiet. The forest felt empty, like something had withdrawn, or maybe it was just watching and waiting. I saw tracks one more time, the morning of closing day, fresh prints in the mud by the barn leading from the woods to the property line and back. One set of prints, the large one, it had come to check to see if we were really leaving. I wondered if it was satisfied, if this was what it had wanted all along, the horses gone, the humans leaving, the property returning to something closer to wild. On moving day, the movers loaded our furniture, our boxes, our lives into a truck. The kids got in my wife's car. She was taking them to her mother's place. They'd stay there while I finished up the last details. Before I got in the truck to follow the movers, I walked to the edge of the property one last time. I looked into the forest, the dark spaces between the trees, the shadows that could hide something massive. I said out loud, "It's yours now. Leave them alone." I don't know if it heard me, don't know if it understood, don't know if it cared, but I needed to say it, needed to believe that leaving would be enough, that the new owners would be safe because they weren't a threat, no horses to hunt, no challenge to its territory. I got in my truck and drove down that long driveway for the last time. In the rearview mirror, I saw something move at the tree line, something large and upright, watching me go. I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. I just drove. We live in a subdivision 40 miles away now. Tiny yard. Neighbors on both sides, close enough that we can hear their television through the walls. The houses are so close together you could reach out your window and touch your neighbor's wall. My kids adjusted fine. Better than I expected. They made new friends at their new school. My daughter joined soccer. My son started taking karate. He said he wanted to learn to protect himself. I didn't argue with him. If it made him feel safer, it was worth it. They don't talk about the old farm much. Sometimes my daughter will mention the pony, wonder how she's doing. I tell her she's probably living her best life. Plenty of grass to eat, no stress. I hope that's true. My wife got a job in town, works at a dental office as a receptionist. She seems happy, relieved. The fear has gone from her eyes. She sleeps through the night now. No more waking up at every sound, reaching for the baseball bat she kept by the bed. I work construction now, framing houses, installing siding, roofing. The work is good, physical, keeps my mind busy. The pay is steady, though not what the farm brought in. We're getting by. But sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning listening for sounds that aren't there anymore. The sound of breaking wood, heavy footsteps, that low rumbling communication. In those moments, I'm back there, standing in the dark with my rifle, facing something I couldn't fight and couldn't understand. Sometimes I drive by the old farm. Just to check, I don't stop, just slow down as I pass. The new owners seem happy. Their garden is thriving. Rows of vegetables, a small greenhouse they built. They have chickens now, a small coop in the side yard with maybe a dozen birds. No horses, nothing big, nothing worth hunting. I wonder if that's why they've been left alone, if the creatures only cared about the horses, about large prey, or maybe they decided that family wasn't a threat, wasn't worth the effort of intimidation. Or maybe the creatures are still there, still watching, and they're just being patient. I still have nightmares about standing in that empty stable at dawn, looking at the broken boards, the dark fur caught in the splintered wood, the wet tracks leading back into the forest, knowing something had been there, something real and terrifying and impossible. I know I made the right choice. I know my family is safe. We're alive. We're together. My kids are happy. My wife isn't living in constant fear anymore. But I still feel like a coward, like I should have fought harder, stood my ground, protected what was mine. Some battles can't be won, though. Survival sometimes means knowing when to walk away, knowing when you're outmatched, when the cost of staying is higher than the cost of leaving. My kids are safe and healthy. They're thriving. They don't wake up scared anymore. My daughter doesn't cry about the hairy man in the window. My son doesn't patrol the house with a baseball bat. That's all that matters, even if it cost me everything else I'd built, even if I lost 3 generations of family history, even if I lost $150,000, even if I lost my identity as a horseman, as a farmer, as someone who belonged to that land. They're safe. That's enough. It has to be enough. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I look up that forest on satellite maps. I zoom in on those acres and acres of untouched wilderness. I think about what's out there, what's still out there, living in those shadows. And I wonder how many other people have seen what I've seen. How many others have been driven from their homes by something that shouldn't exist. How many have chosen to stay silent because no one would believe them, because saying it out loud makes you sound crazy. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. My wife knows. My kids know. The horses knew before any of us did. There are things in those woods that science doesn't recognize. Things that are smart enough to avoid cameras and stay hidden. Things that are strong enough to snap a horse's neck with their bare hands. Things that can coordinate attacks, plan strategy, send messages. They're real, they're out there, and they don't want us in their territory. If you're reading this and you've had an experience like mine, if you've seen something in the woods that you can't explain, something that watched you from the shadows and made you feel like prey, I believe you. I know what it's like to see something impossible and have no one to tell, to carry that knowledge alone. And if you're thinking about buying property near dense forest, near untouched wilderness, I have one piece of advice. Pay attention to the signs, the broken fencing, the strange tracks, the way the animals act, the feeling of being watched. Don't ignore it like I did. Don't rationalize it away. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Because by the time you realize what it really is, it might be too late. I got out. My family is safe. But I lost everything else in the process. And somewhere in those woods, in that forest that stretches for miles behind the farm that used to be mine, something is still there, still watching, still waiting. And it always will be, because that's its home, not ours. We were just visitors who overstayed our welcome, and when we wouldn't leave on our own, it made us leave. I hope the new owners never see what I saw. I hope their chickens and their garden aren't interesting enough to attract attention. I hope they can live there happily, never knowing what's watching from the trees. But sometimes I worry. Sometimes I think about warning them properly, telling them everything. But what would I say? How do you explain something like that to someone who hasn't lived through it? You can't. They'd think I was crazy, just like I would have thought someone was crazy if they'd told me before I saw it myself. So I don't say anything. I just drive by sometimes, check that the lights are on, that everything looks normal, that the forest is still just forest, and I hope that's enough. For more interesting stories, check this out.